Please, take care of her." When the millionaire pulled back the blanket, he froze in shock. The sidewalk was damp with urine, and the cold wind made the thin blanket tremble between the boy's bony arms. He couldn't have been older than 7, barefoot, with feet blackened by grime and cracked from the cold. In his lap, a poorly tied bundle trembled softly, as if it were breathing. The crying from inside was faint, muffled by the dirty cloth. He wasn't looking at the cars anymore. He stood still, unmoving, eyes fixed on the man in the suit who had just stepped out of the coffee shop. The boy didn't say anything at first. He simply extended his arms to show what he was carrying. "Take her, sir, please. She's hungry. I can't do it anymore." The man furrowed his brow, not quite understanding, but when he crouched down and carefully pulled back the edge of the blanket, what he saw made his knees give out. The tiny girl's skin was bluish at the edges, her eyes half closed, lips dry, and breathing shallow. A baby, maybe 6 months, old, genuinely starving to death. But that's not what broke him. It was the smell, sweet and rotten at the same time, the sour scent of spoiled milk and something else the millionaire couldn't name, but he knew it wasn't right. He collapsed to his knees, his tie swaying in the wind, eyes dazed. "How long has she been like this?" he asked, voice breaking. "Since yesterday. Mum didn't come back, and the milk ran out." But there was more the boy hadn't said. The millionaire, who had walked Manhattan's streets for years without ever noticing the ones sleeping on cardboard, now found himself touching a child dying from starvation. And it shattered him. You're alone?" he asked again. The boy hesitated, lowered his eyes. "I hid her. When they came to take us, I hid her. She couldn't go there. And then," he told the rest, "he said the shelter workers had taken other kids. He said a neighbor had screamed and the police came, but they only took the older ones. He had stayed, hidden in a cabinet, holding the baby wrapped in blankets, muffling her cries with bread soaked in tap water." The millionaire didn't know what to do. He tried to make a call, but his fingers were trembling. Coffee spilled from the paper bag he held, and when he looked at the boy again, he saw something he had never seen before: surrender. But even then, he didn't know everything, because inside that bundle, along with the baby, was a note. A crumpled piece of paper written in red pen. When the millionaire opened it, his heart seemed to stop for 2 seconds. "Her name is Hope. Take care of her if I don't make it." The sound of the city faded in that moment. Cars passed, horns blared, but around the 3 of them, the man kneeling, the boy standing, and the blanket holding the fragile life of the baby, time seemed to freeze. The note trembled in the millionaire's hand, thin paper soaked by the drizzle that had just begun to fall. He stared at those simple words, written with a desperation that cut deep. "Take care of her if I don't make it." It wasn't just a request. It was a farewell. The question slipped out before he could stop it. "Did you write this, kid?" He shook his head slowly, eyes filled with a shame no child that age should ever carry. "My mum. She wrote it before she left. Said she'd get help, but she never came back." That's where the story began. Not with sirens or shouting, but with silence. The silence of a mother who no longer had strength. The silence of a door closing and never opening again. And the boy stayed, with his sister in his arms, with empty pots, with the cold creeping in through broken windows. That boy's journey hadn't been walked with footsteps. It was built on choices no child should have to make. The first, hiding. His sister when social workers came. The second, tearing down curtains to wrap her in a makeshift crib. The third, knocking on doors asking for old bread. And now, the last. Handing over the only person he still called family, because he believed she'd have a better chance with a stranger in a suit than with him. But the millionaire was still frozen in that moment. He felt his throat tighten, not just out of pity, but something deeper, a forgotten memory, an old wound. There was something in the boy's eyes he recognized, and that scared him. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. "Tyler," the boy answered. "And your sister, Hope?" He nodded. "She never cried much, just now, since yesterday." The man stood up, knees aching. Looked around. People passed by, some slowed down, others looked away. No one stopped. He gently lifted the blanket, holding it against his chest. "Come with me. We have to get her out of here." But the boy didn't move. "I can't go. If they see us together, they'll take her too. They take kids and send them somewhere else. I saw what happens there." The millionaire froze. He knew public institutions could be harsh places, but the way Tyler said it carried something else. Real fear, fear rooted in memory. "What place?" he asked, crouching again, looking into the boy's eyes. "It's a big house. They keep the little ones in the back. Sometimes they yell at them, sometimes they forget to feed them. I saw a girl stop moving once. They just covered her and left her in the corner." His stomach turned. Hope couldn't go there, but they couldn't stay here either. "So, what do you want me to do?" he asked, nearly pleading. The boy thought for a long time, then finally answered, voice low, "Take her, but leave me. I can't watch her go, but I want her to live." And that's when the millionaire understood what was in front of him. This wasn't just a cry for help, it was a sacrifice. A 7-year-old boy willing to vanish from his sister's life to save her. He couldn't let that happen. "You're coming with me, both of you. I'll figure it out. No one's taking you, I promise." But there was something he still didn't know, something that would turn that promise into a much bigger challenge than it seemed, because when he tried to register the baby at the hospital, something came up, something in the system. A name, a file, a link to the millionaire's own past. That would change everything. The taxi moved through the streets of Manhattan, windows shut, silence heavy inside. Tyler, shoulders hunched, kept his gaze fixed on the window, avoiding the sight of the man beside him holding Hope, now wrapped in a clean blanket from the ER. The millionaire, still in shock, felt like he was floating. The last 2 hours had been a blur. Rushing into the hospital, doctors' concerned looks, the quick diagnosis, severe dehydration, malnutrition, risk of multiple organ failure, and the panic when they mentioned calling child services. But he moved fast. He called someone, a name he hadn't spoken in years, and within 15 minutes a lawyer arrived with a folder and an emergency order signed by a judge. Hope was now under his temporary custody. He still didn't fully understand why he had done it. He only knew he had to. The taxi stopped in front of a tall building with a glass facade and a guarded front desk. The driver looked into the rearview mirror, suspicious, as if that dirty boy and that sick baby didn't belong in that world. And they didn't. Not yet. But no one asked questions. "Come on, Tyler," the man said, stepping out with Hope in. His arms, the boy hesitated. "She's staying here. Both of you are." They rode up in silence to the top floor. The apartment was huge but cold, white, spotless, empty. No photos on the walls, no sound of life. Hope was gently laid on a leather couch. Tyler stood by the door, his eyes wandering over the polished floor. The millionaire went into the kitchen, opened a drawer and pulled out a box of cookies. He came back and handed it to the boy. Tyler took it as if holding something sacred. He opened it slowly, bit into one, and swallowed almost without chewing. That's when the first rupture came. The man looked at his phone screen. His assistant had sent a message. "We need to talk. Urgent. There are records under the child's name that connect to something. Yours." He froze. That didn't make sense. Hope was a baby found on the street. But something inside him was already stirring. A buried memory locked away in some drawer of his mind. "Tyler," he said, voice as calm as he could make it. "Your dad. Is he still around?" The boy stopped chewing, lowered his head. He left before Hope was born. Said she wasn't his. That mom lied. And then it clicked. That sentence echoed in the millionaire's mind. She wasn't his. With it came a face, a name, a night more than 7 years ago. A woman with green eyes, messy hair, an awkward smile. A woman he'd met before becoming the man he was today, and suddenly, he understood. He walked into his office, locked the door, turned on his computer, and opened the documents his assistant had sent. The names matched. The mother's last name, the date, the location, and there, buried in the records, a genetic test filed in the hospital system, a paternity check from months ago. but no follow-up. His name was listed as a possible biological father. He couldn't breathe. He collapsed into the chair. Hope could be his. He returned to the living room, now seeing Tyler as if for the first time. "Did your mom ever talk about me?" Tyler furrowed his brow. "She said she met a man before everything got worse, that he was kind. But she got scared." "Scared of what?" "That he wouldn't stay, because she already had me." His heart tightened. The connection was made. This wasn't charity, this wasn't rescue, it was something deeper, a piece of his own past whispering back through the chaos. And then the intercom buzzed. It was the hospital. Hope had been admitted again. The fever had returned. And there was something new. Something no one had noticed before. A mark on her body. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like button. The ambulance siren cut through the silence like a razor. The millionaire rushed down the stairs with Hope in his arms, her face too pale, eyes barely open, her forehead burning against his chest. Tyler followed behind, trying to stay calm, but trembling. It wasn't just fear, it was memory. Every sharp sound, every flash of movement brought back the last time his sister had been taken, though that time it was just for a checkup. Inside the ambulance, the paramedics moved quickly. Oxygen mask, thermometer, pulse oximeter. The man held Hope's hand like his life depended on it. And maybe it did. Because the moment he first looked into her face, something inside him had begun to crack. Something he had locked away for years. Guilt, absence, a life built on contracts, control, and silence. At the hospital, the doctor was blunt. "The fever's back due to an infection, but there's something we need to show you." She turned a monitor toward him, pointing to a scan. "Here, on her back, a birthmark, triangular, sharp edges. We've seen it before." The millionaire narrowed his eyes. "Is it serious?" She paused. "No. But interesting. A child came in about 7 years ago from the same neighborhood you mentioned, with the exact same mark." Time stopped. 7 years ago. A rough neighborhood. A woman. With green eyes. A night that never ended the way he thought it would. He'd been haunted by that memory for years, though he never told anyone. And now everything was circling back to a fate he had tried to bury in wealth. Tyler sat silently in the chair beside him, watching. When the doctor left the room, he leaned in and whispered, "Do you think she's gonna die?" The millionaire swallowed hard. "No, I'll do everything I can to make sure she's okay. Even if she's your daughter." He couldn't answer, because the question didn't come with bitterness, it came with fear. Fear that if it was true, he'd leave. Just like everyone else. "Why do you think that, Tyler?" "Because my mom said when people find out who you really are, they leave." And there it was. A sentence that hurt more than any test result. The worldview of a boy who had watched faces disappear, uncles, neighbors, classmates, everyone left. Because poverty has a smell, a weight, and the ones who can choose usually choose to walk away. But the millionaire didn't walk away. He moved closer. He stayed by Hope's side through the night, placing cold cloths on her forehead, trying to get Tyler to rest on a narrow waiting room couch. And meanwhile he sent messages, arranged paperwork, dug into the files he once ordered deleted. He found photos, messages, emails with a woman named Lorna. She had been pregnant. He had ignored her, told himself it was a scam, never replied. But now looking at Hope, there was no denying it. She was his daughter. At dawn the next day, the doctor returned with the results. "She's responding well to the medication, but she'll need to stay a few more days." He nodded. "And the DNA?" She took a breath. "Confirmed. You're the biological father." He closed his eyes. He should have felt relief, but all he felt was weight. A life built on contracts, numbers and distance was now collapsing under a single document. Hope was his daughter. And Tyler, her half-brother, had been trying to save the one person their father had abandoned. But there was one thing the hospital hadn't anticipated. As he arranged the legal paperwork for permanent custody, a notification appeared in his inbox. Petition for emergency guardianship filed. Applicant, Mrs. Martha Crowley. Who was Martha Crowley? And why did she want custody of Hope? Her name echoed in his mind like a muffled drumbeat. He stared at the screen, the official seal on the document, and felt the air thin in the hospital waiting room. No photos. Just a name and a signature from a woman he didn't know, or thought he didn't. The custody request had been marked as urgent. The reasoning was short and devastating. Minors in high-risk abandonment situation. He locked his phone and looked at Tyler, still asleep on the hard chair, covered with a makeshift blanket. Hope remained in the ICU, fragile but stable. It all felt like it could fall apart at any second. And now someone was trying to pull that thread. Who is this woman? He muttered to himself. He called his attorney, who answered on the second ring. Martha Crowley works for a private agency. They monitor high-profile public cases. When they spot potential legal exposure, they file preemptive custody motions. Exposure? Your name showed up in the healthcare system linked to hers. It may have leaked. Someone saw an opportunity. His blood boiled. That was it. This wasn't about compassion. It was about power, about control, about cold bureaucracy that saw a child not as a human being, but as a number. And in that game, real feelings didn't matter. Only who showed. Up first with a stamped form. He stood up and went straight to the hospital administration, asked to see the documents submitted by Martha. And there, among the letter-headed pages, he found the one line that shook him the most. Mr. Weston has a documented history of paternal absence, has never legally acknowledged the child, and shows no verified emotional bond. The doctor appeared a few minutes later. Is there a problem? He could barely contain his anger. They're trying to take her away from me. The baby is under your temporary guardianship. But with this petition, we'll need to provide documents proving a parental connection. I'm her father. The DNA proves it. Yes, but legally you're not registered as her parent yet. And that's when the first real risk appeared, because to legally register Hope as his daughter, he would have to go public with a story he'd tried to bury for years. And that would bring questions about her mother, about their past, about his reasons for being absent. He, who had always controlled his own narrative, would now have to admit he ran, that he failed, that he chose silence. That night, Tyler called him something different for the first time. Mr. Weston, are you really going to take her with you? He hesitated, then knelt in front of the boy. I'm not going anywhere without both of you. But if that lady takes her, I'll be alone. That's when he knew what he had to do. The next day, he went in person to the civil registry office, filled out the paperwork, signed the affidavits, submitted copies of the DNA test, then filed a formal request for judicial recognition of paternity. The process would move quickly, but it wouldn't be enough, because Martha Crowley had already scheduled a custody hearing for 48 hours later, and her organization was notorious for securing legal guardianship before biological parents could react. So he made a bold decision. He called a press conference. He stepped in front of the cameras, something he hadn't done in years, with Tyler by his side. No makeup, no script. And he spoke. 7 years ago, I made a mistake. I walked away from someone who said she was pregnant. I didn't believe her. I ran. Today, that child is in a hospital, fighting to survive. And I am her father. The footage spread across the country in minutes, websites, social media, news outlets. Some praised his courage, others condemned his past. But for the juvenile court judge, it was decisive. A public gesture of reparation. But Martha Crowley didn't back down. In court, she brought something no one expected. A video, footage from a security camera showing Tyler hiding behind a dumpster, feeding his sister scraps of food. Her lawyer's narration was cold and sharp. This child lived on the streets unprotected. This man only appeared now. What he wants is to protect his image, not the child. The judge remained silent for what felt like forever, then said, I need to hear from the boy. Tyler stood in the courtroom, far too small for the tall witness chair they'd placed in the center. His feet didn't touch the floor. He gently swung his legs, trying to hide the trembling in his hands. Before him, the judge looked on, not cold but not warm either. To the left, Martha's attorney arranged her papers with surgical precision. To the right, Weston sat tense, gripping his thighs, jaw locked tight. And behind it all, Hope was still in the hospital, hooked to monitors and tubes, unaware of the war being waged for her. "Tyler," said the judge, voice deep but gentle, "what would you like to tell me today?" The boy took a deep breath, looked down for a few seconds, then raised his eyes to meet the judge's. "I hid my sister because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "That they'd take her to a place where no one looks, where kids are alone, where people disappear." The room went silent. Pens stopped moving. Breaths were held. Even Martha's lawyer seemed to hesitate for a second. "And why do you think Mr. Weston can care for her?" the judge asked, softer now. Tyler turned to Weston. His sunken, tired eyes filled with something no script could match. Because when he saw her, he didn't run. He knelt down, like my mum used to do when I got hurt. No one does that unless they feel something. Not even if they're rich. Not even if they're a stranger. But the judge still had doubts. There were laws, deadlines, procedures, and in that fractured moment, everything seemed to depend not on logic, but on something more primal. Trust. "Tyler," he asked again, "do you want to stay with him? Even after everything he didn't?" "I do. Even not knowing if he'll stay." The boy didn't flinch. "I'd rather take my chances with someone who cried for her than with people who only read spreadsheets." The assistant judge whispered something. The judge called for a 10-minute recess. The courtroom emptied. Weston stumbled into the hallway, leaning against the marble wall. The pressure in his head made it hard to breathe. The shame of the past hit him like sledgehammers. He tried to hold himself together, but when he pressed his back to the cold wall, he broke. The tears came uninvited. Tears he hadn't shed since his parents' death, since the day he decided to build walls around himself, against pain, against connection, against people. Now, all those walls were gone, and the powerful man had become right there on the floor, just a father begging for a second chance. It was Tyler who found him sitting there. "Are you giving up?" the boy asked. Weston looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "No, not anymore." A few minutes later, they all returned to the courtroom. The judge announced a preliminary decision. Emergency custody would remain with Weston, but under supervision. The final decision would depend on psychological evaluations, bonding reports, and Hope's health condition. But the next day, something unexpected happened. The hospital called. Hope had woken up. Weston and Tyler rushed there. When they entered the room, she was weak, but her eyes were open. Her tiny hand reached out, searching. Weston approached slowly. She recognized something. His scent, his warmth, maybe just the rhythm of his touch, and smiled. A small, toothless smile. But it shattered him completely. And in that exact moment, Martha Crowley walked into the room with a new court order in hand. The organization is appealing the decision. This time based on the child's physical safety. We claim the current environment is emotionally unstable. Weston turned, Hope still in his arms, shocked. "You want to take her away now?" "No, but I want you to know, this fight isn't over." And then she left, leaving behind the shadow of a legal war that had only just begun. Across the room, Tyler looked at his sister, then whispered something only Weston could hear. "If they take her, I won't stay." The next morning broke grey, and for the first time since the storm began, Weston didn't run. He didn't call his lawyers, didn't send emails, didn't schedule meetings. He just sat beside Hope's hospital bed watching the soft rise and fall of her chest beneath the tiny pajama top. Across the room, Tyler slept curled in an armchair, one hand still clutching his sister's foot. That scene alone was worth more than any legal argument. It was family. Broken. Bruised, but real. And it was in that silence that he finally began to understand. This wasn't about winning a case anymore. It was about deserving to stay. About proving, to those two children and to himself, that he could be more than a businessman, more than the man who shows up at the end of the story. When Tyler woke up, Weston had his head down, writing in a notebook. "Are you drawing?" the boy asked, rubbing his eyes. "No," Weston replied. "I'm writing something." What? He hesitated, then smiled. A journal. I want to remember everything. How we got here. Tyler came closer, carefully. He sat beside him and looked at the first page. Are you going to write Hope's name in there? Already did, yours too. It was the first real gesture of empathy between them. Not protector and protected, but two human beings from different generations, trying to figure out how to fix the world in their own way. Later, in the hospital cafeteria, a nurse approached. She smiled when she heard your voice, she told Weston. She remembers me. Babies remember what they feel. If she smiled, it's because she feels safe, and that's rare in these cases. The comment echoed in his head. It wasn't enough to love. He had to be there. And so Weston did something he'd never done in his life. He sat down with Tyler and really listened. For almost an hour, the boy spoke. He talked about life with his mum, about the good days, when she sang, made pancakes for dinner, played old movies, and the bad days, when she cried in the bathroom and whispered she couldn't go on. He told Weston how he learned to mix powdered milk with rainwater, how he slept hugging his sister, even afraid of the rats, and how at some point he realized he was growing up alone. Weston didn't interrupt. Every word was an open wound. And the more the boy spoke, the more he saw the weight of the responsibility now in his hands. Do you remember her? Tyler asked suddenly. Your mum? Yeah, a little. She used to say you were good, but she was scared you. Wouldn't feel like enough. The sentence hit Weston like a cold blade. How many times had he felt that way? In boardrooms, in investments, in every silence of his past. And now, hearing it from a boy, it became almost unbearable. The next day, Weston made an unexpected decision. He took Tyler with him to visit his mother's old apartment. It was sealed and abandoned, but he'd gotten temporary access. He wanted the boy to say goodbye, his own way. The air inside smelled of mildew and dust. But there was something more. Walls covered in childish drawings, a cracked mirror with photos taped to the edges, a one-eyed teddy bear. Tyler walked slowly, touching objects like he was touching ghosts. This is where she used to sing, he whispered. Weston said nothing. He didn't want to intrude, but Tyler turned and handed him something. This. Here's for you. She kept it. I think it's yours. It was a photograph, faded, worn, but clear enough. Weston and Lorna together. She was smiling, visibly pregnant. He was looking at the camera with a half smile, still unaware how much that moment would change his life. Weston knelt down in front of the boy. Thank you for not giving up on her, for not giving up on me. I just wanted her to live and seal for someone to stay. That was the turning point, because there, on the floor of that abandoned apartment, they chose to become a family, not by obligation, not by signed papers, but because they wanted to, because they needed each other. But the battle still wasn't over. Back at the hospital, they received a new notice. The final custody hearing had been moved up. They had only 5 days to prove they were, in fact, a functional family. And this time, Martha Crowley was bringing witnesses. 5 days. That's all they had to prepare for a hearing that would decide everything. And Weston knew, no perfectly, crafted document would convince the judge of what he felt. It had to be lived, shown, embodied. So the following days were different. Weston didn't go home. He spent every night at the hospital beside Hope. When she cried, he was the one who held her. When she smiled, it was at him. He learned how to prepare bottles, change diapers, tell the difference between a pain cry and a tired one. And with Tyler, the walls completely came down. They brought breakfast to Hope's room together, shared stories. Weston told him, for the first time, asked about his own childhood, how he lost his mother early, how his father was silent, how he was afraid of becoming just like him. Tyler listened carefully, the way only someone who understands pain at any age can. On the third morning, a psychologist assigned by the court came for a visit. He expected to find two strangers coexisting out of necessity. Instead, he found something different. Hope slept in Weston's arms, rocking gently as he read aloud to Tyler. It wasn't an act, it was habit. It was affection, grown. The psychologist asked difficult questions about structure, routine, future plans. Weston answered calmly. But once again, it was Tyler who shattered all doubt. I remember how cold it was on the sidewalk. And I remember his hand shaking when he held my sister. You can't teach that, you just feel it. In his preliminary report, the psychologist wrote a single sentence that would resonate in court. This man isn't trying to be a hero. He's trying for the first time to be human. But Martha wasn't done. The night before the hearing, she sent a final notice. She would bring 2 witnesses, a former nurse who cared for Lorna in her last months, and a neighbor who claimed Weston had ignored attempts by the mother to contact him. The strategy was clear: prove he had a chance, and chose not to act. That night, Weston didn't sleep. Neither did Tyler. They sat on the hospital balcony looking out over the city. Weston handed him a small box. "This is for you." "What is it?" "My watch. I got it when I started my company. It meant everything was working. Now, I want it to mean something for you." "I don't even know how to tell time yet." "Then I'll teach you. Together." Tyler smiled, for the first time without fear. A quiet smile, full of something new. Trust. The next morning, the courtroom was full. Martha arrived, looking sharp, confident. She presented her witnesses, her videos, her evidence. She spoke with precision, painting Weston as a man driven by guilt, not love. But Weston didn't respond with arguments. He asked to speak last. He stood, faced the judge, then looked at Tyler, and finally at Hope, sleeping in a nurse's arms. "I'm not here to say I deserve this. Maybe I don't. I failed. I ran. I hid. But 5 days ago, when this child smiled at me, something changed. This isn't about saving anyone. It's about becoming someone who doesn't run anymore. Not from her, not from him, not from myself." He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. "And if I have to spend the rest of my life proving I can be a father, I'll do it. One day at a time, one mistake at a time, but with them. Always with them." The judge was silent. He placed his pen on the table, looked at Martha, then at the psychologist, then at Weston, then at the children. "A decision will be made in 24 hours, but as if fate still had one more test to throw their way. A phone call interrupted the end of the session. It was from the hospital. Hope was having a seizure. The ambulance was already waiting at the courthouse doors when Weston came running down the steps. Tyler's hand clutched tightly in his own. His face looked carved from stone. No tears, no panic, only the raw urgency of a man who knew what it meant to lose everything, and was now running so he wouldn't lose again. Hope had suffered a seizure in her hospital bed less than an hour after the hearing. The fever that had seemed under control came back with a vengeance, and within minutes she stopped responding. In the car, Tyler trembled. He didn't speak, just stared straight ahead, his eyes wide, as if waiting for everything to collapse. All over again. "Is she going to die?" he asked finally, his voice caught in his throat. "No, she's going to fight, like she always has." Weston held his hand tightly, but inside he was crumbling. They reached the ICU without speaking another word. Doctors moved quickly. Needles, tubes, monitors. The lead physician turned to Weston with the expression he feared most, the one of someone who's seen this before. "We have to be honest. Her body is shutting down. Her immune system isn't responding." "What can I do?" Weston asked, almost begging. "Right now. Just wait." He sat down beside the tiny bed, the sound of the machines filling every silence between the beats of his heart. Tyler stood nearby, unsure of where to place his hands. Weston gently pulled him into his lap. "Stay here. We'll wait together." Time moved slowly. With every beep of the monitor, Weston felt the world tilt. He began writing again, but this time it wasn't a journal. It was a letter to Hope. "Dear daughter, it still feels strange to say that, but you are, and always will be. If you make it out of here, I promise you'll see snow, balloons in the park, the smell of Sunday pancakes. And if you don't, wait for me somewhere I can find you. I love you, Dad. He folded the paper and placed it beside her blanket. "Is that for her?" Tyler asked. "Yeah, I had some things I needed to say." "Can I write something too?" Weston handed him the pen and notebook. The boy drew a star, and beneath it wrote just 3 words. "You are everything." That's when something changed. On the monitor, subtle at first, her heart rate began to stabilize. The doctor came back, checked the data, and for the first time a faint smile crossed her face. She might be responding. But the fight wasn't over yet. Back at the courthouse, Martha used Weston's absence to her advantage. She filed an emergency injunction, claiming the current guardian was emotionally unfit to care for a critically ill child. Her legal team moved fast. Within 3 hours, the presiding judge approved a new emergency hearing. When Weston received the notice, rage overtook him. "They want to take her from me? Now? From the hospital?" "Yes. They expect you. Say to surrender custody by tomorrow morning." He looked at Tyler, at Hope, at the machines, the tubes, the oxygen line, and with a certainty he had never felt before. He knew he would not allow it. That night, Weston did something he never imagined he would. He went live on social media. No production crew, just a trembling hand and a phone. He showed Hope's tiny face, the medical equipment, Tyler's tear-stained eyes, and he spoke. "Judge me for who I was, but now, look at this child. This isn't about a name on paper anymore. It's about real life, about what it means to love someone even when you don't know how, and staying anyway." The video went viral within minutes. Hashtags exploded. People began sharing stories of adoption, redemption, late fatherhood, and in the middle of the digital chaos, something unexpected happened. A former colleague of Martha's, someone who had worked alongside her for over a decade, sent Weston's legal team anonymous documents, internal reports, suppressed files, evidence that Martha's organization had lost custody of 3 children due to negligence and was currently under investigation in another state. It was the missing piece. Weston submitted the evidence to the judge that same night, along with a formal request to move the final hearing up to the next morning. But while the lawyers prepared their defense, the doctor returned to the waiting room, her face tight with concern. "She's unstable again. And there's more. We've identified a secondary infection. If she doesn't respond to the new antibiotic, it'll be a matter of hours." Hope was motionless, but alive. The new medication flowed through her tiny veins via a fragile catheter. The steady rhythm of the monitors now matched Weston's own heartbeat. He never left the room. He stayed up all night, counting the pauses between beeps, holding her hand, whispering the same words over and over like a silent prayer. "Stay. Just a little longer. Stay with me." Tyler fell asleep with his head resting against the bed rail. His fingers wrapped around his sister's, afraid to let go. The night dragged on, long and cruel, each second stretched into eternity, until the sky began to brighten. Not with sunlight, but with that deep, still blue that only comes just before dawn. And then Hope moved. First a flicker of her fingers, then a faint, choked cough. Weston called for the doctor. In seconds, the room filled with staff. They adjusted her position, changed oxygen levels, and then she opened her eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just looked. A small, exhausted gaze, but alive. Alive. And in that gaze was everything. The hunger, the cold, the loneliness, and now presence. Weston dropped to his knees, not in pain but in something rarer. Surrender. He had spent a lifetime trying to control everything, but in that moment, witnessing the miracle of a child surviving against all odds, he understood. Love isn't commanded. It's offered. Hours later, they were back in court. This time, Hope was present too, in a wheelchair, with a blanket over her legs and Tyler at her side. The judge looked at them, then at Martha, who remained composed but without the shine she once had. The documents had been reviewed. Investigations were underway. Her moral ground was gone. "The court has reviewed all the evidence," the judge began. "We've heard the testimonies. We've read the reports. This is more than a legal decision. It is a matter of destiny." Weston held the children's hands, one on each side. "By unanimous decision of this court, full legal custody of Hope and Tyler Weston is hereby granted to Mr. Daniel Weston. Furthermore, based on the psychological report, we recommend the initiation of formal adoption proceedings for Tyler, should that be the mutual desire." Tyler looked up at him, speechless. Weston nodded. "If you let me be your dad, I'll never leave again." The boy took a breath, as if that was the answer he'd waited for his entire life. Then, in a gesture small but devastating, he rested his head against Weston's chest. "You can call me son, if you want." The courtroom began to applaud, softly at first, then louder, not just for the ending, but for everything those children had survived, every night spent hungry, every step taken alone. Now they had a home. As they left the courthouse, a group of reporters tried to surround them. Weston raised a hand and simply said, "Today is not a day for headlines. Today is a day for silence." In the car, Tyler watched the city roll past the window. Hope slept in her father's arms. Then he asked, "Do you think Mom knows?" Weston took his time to answer. I think she chose someone to finish what she started. And what if one day I forget her? Forget her? You won't forget, because every time you take care of your sister, she'll remember she's in both of you." When they got home, it wasn't the same white, empty apartment as before. Weston had transformed it. He'd had a room made, just for them. A bed with toys, books, a colorful rug, a wall mural with the words written in chalk, "First day of the rest of our lives." Hope was laid gently into her new bed. Tyler sat beside her and picked up his father's notebook. "Can I write something?" "Of course." The boy wrote slowly, letter by letter on the very last page. Sometimes love comes after the mistake, but it still comes. And when it does, it stays. Weston looked at the words and said nothing. He simply closed the notebook, leaned back against the wall and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he felt no guilt, no rush, no fear, only peace. "Thank you for staying with us this far. But don't go just yet. On the screen beside you, there's another powerful story waiting. Click, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who believes in second chances. I'll be waiting for you there."